or the other, like a smart farm or something like that, can they apply it for that kind of the field?
Yeah, sure. We have two different platforms, but the common and the core technology is almost similar. So first part is the defense and the national security, and the other side is the climate change and the weather and the disaster monitoring, and also high value infrastructure monitoring is really important. So we kept pushing support that kind of industry.
Oh, I see.
So what is your outlook for the next 10 years in terms of AI in the defense industry?
Yeah, in next 10 years, the battlefield is fulfilled with not just the human. A lot of the autonomous weapon and robotics and the vehicle, but we have not enough land of the sea, so in a certain period, we cannot go further to the attack or defense side. So in my mind, at that point, every country cannot go further through the defense or the warfare, so they just stop to fighting because they already know each other real time and what is the inside
like deterrence
and that's that. Yeah,
more
so,
than a means of attack?
Yeah. At the end of this preparation for the AI-enabled system can stop the warfare.
Can
definitely.
stop warfare?
Yeah, sure.
So no more fighting because everybody knows each other's capabilities. So we come to a full deterrence.
Right.
Okay, what a fascinating outlook. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Kang and Dr. John, for sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, that's all for today. Join us next week with me and Dr. Kang as we sit down with another leader driving Korea's AI technology. Thanks for watching.
The moment we wear it, our spirits lift. It helps us grow strong in body and in mind. As we wear it, we learn patience and respect. The belt system motivates students to strive harder and continue growing. This uniform shapes movement into grace and turns performance into something thrilling. Now, embraced around the world, Taekwondo shares our culture, philosophy, and values with pride and spirit. Though it may seem simple, this uniform holds your passion and your journey. It belongs to Taekwondo. Wear the extraordinary. Be with Taekwondo.
The South Korean police are tracking down the suspect behind the massive data breach at e-commerce giant Coupang using the suspect's IP address. South Korea broke the record for outbound shipments for any month in November last month on the back of strong demand for semiconductors and automobiles. In light of the upcoming first anniversary of the debauched martial law order by former President Yoon, President Yoon will deliver a special statement this Wednesday. He's set to officially declare the restoration of the country's democracy during a conference with foreign media. We begin with a massive data breach at e-commerce giant Coupang. The police are now tracking the IP address of a suspect after South Korea's biggest e-commerce platform announced over the weekend that over 30 million private accounts have been compromised. Cha Yoon reports.
The police said on Monday that in the course of their investigation into the case, they secured the IP address of a suspect in the Coupang personal data leak. An official at the Seoul Metropolitan Police Agency said at a regular press briefing that officers had received server log records from Coupang, and during an analysis of them, they secured the IP address a suspect used in the crime and were tracking it down. The SMPA said the nationality and current status of the suspect were under verification, adding that no reports of secondary damage have been received, and the agency is working closely with relevant ministries. The U.S.-listed e-commerce firm Coupang, which mainly operates in South Korea, publicly apologized on Sunday after the personal information of more than 33.7 million users was stolen. The apology came just 10 days after the company revealed on November 20th that customer account information in 4,500 accounts had been leaked.
I would like to offer my sincere apologies.
Minister Bae Kyung-hoon of the Ministry of Science and ICT also said on Sunday that an unidentified attacker took advantage of a server authentication vulnerability in Coupang's system, enabling them to access users' names, email accounts, phone numbers, and addresses. Meanwhile, Coupang said there was no exposure of payment details or login credentials. Local media outlets reported that a Chinese former employee at Coupang who left Korea and moved back to China was suspected of being behind the data breach. The company, however, declined to comment on the suspect's identification. Coupang said that the unauthorized access to personal information appears to have been made through overseas servers starting June 24th. Users of Coupang are voicing frustration and raising concerns about secondary harm, criticizing the company for taking 5 months to realize there had been multiple data breaches. Cha Yoon, Arirang News.
South Korea's exports hit a record November high, driven by surging semiconductor and automobile shipments despite concerns over U.S. tariffs. Our Moon Jeong has more.
Exports hit a record high for any November, rising 8.4% year-on-year to just over $61 billion, driven by strong chip and auto demand. According to the Trade Ministry on Monday, cumulative exports from January to November reached $640 billion, putting Korea on track to top $700 billion for the first time. Semiconductors led November's gains. Chip exports jumped nearly 39% to an all-time monthly high of over $17 billion, boosted by rising memory prices and continued demand for high-value products used in AI and data centers.
It's still a bit early for me to give a full outlook for next year, but when it comes to semiconductor exports, the expectation for now is that chip prices will remain relatively strong into next year. Much of that momentum is driven by continued demand from AI servers and data-related applications.
Autos also posted solid growth. Exports rose more than 13%, powered by internal combustion models and hybrids, despite U.S. tariff pressure.
The recent tariff agreement has also played a meaningful role in boosting corporate operating profits and reducing uncertainty. Over the medium to long term, it is expected to strengthen the export competitiveness of automakers.
Petroleum and petrochemical shipments fell on oversupply concerns, while steel exports dropped 16% amid high U.S. tariff and weaker global demand. By region, exports to the U.S. inched down 0.2% as gains in chips and cars were offset by sharp drops in steel and machinery. Exports to China rose nearly 7%, and shipments to the Middle East jumped over 33%. Industry Minister Kim Jong-un said the continued recovery reflects strong performances in semiconductors, automobiles, and biohealth. He added that Seoul's recent submission of a special bill linked to its $350 billion U.S. investment pledge meets conditions for Washington to lower tariff on Korean vehicles and auto parts. Imports rose 1.2% to $51.3 billion, generating a trade surplus of $9.73 billion. 문지영, Arirang News.
This coming Wednesday, the nation marks the first anniversary of the brief military rule imposed by former President Yoon Suk-yeol. On the anniversary, President Lee Jae-myung will address the nation, stressing the efforts by the people and the restoration of a K-democracy. Our Presidential Office correspondent Yoon Chang-min reports.
President Lee Jae-myung will deliver a special statement on December 3rd, the first anniversary of the martial law declaration by his predecessor.
The statement will be about remembering the efforts by the people who have turned extreme chaos into peace.
A press conference is also scheduled on Wednesday with dozens of foreign journalists, as the secretary added that the anniversary will be remembered in a calm manner, but meaningful.
It will be held under the title of A Renewed Democracy, 1 year on. The president will declare the restoration of K-democracy to the international community and deliver a message of national unity.
Later in the day, Lee will have a luncheon with the 5 key figures, including South Korea's Supreme Court Chief Justice. Ahead of the anniversary, the president took to social media on Monday, saying if you neglect acts of insurrection that are lurking on every corner, it'll surely recur someday, as he posted a related article. It's widely seen as him revisiting his will to make sure any remnants related to the short-lived military ruling would not go unpunished. On December 3, 2024, former President Yoon Suk-yeol declared martial law, citing a fight against anti-state forces, which was lifted 6 hours later after it was voted down by the National Assembly. It has resulted in him being removed from the office, who's now facing insurrection charges. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
So a lot has happened since the night of the martial law order. One question, however, still remains to be answered. How will those responsible for the actions on December 3rd, 2024 be criminally charged? Or, as a matter of fact, will they be? Our Kim Do-yeon keeps us to date.
1 year since special forces and tanks were deployed to the National Assembly in the middle of the night. Then President Yoon Suk-yeol, while not politically impeached, awaits his ruling for criminal charges. In the immediate aftermath, 3 different agencies, the Corruption Investigation Office, prosecutors, and police all jumped in to catch the biggest suspect in their history. But the initial probe stalled. The game changed when President Lee Jae-myung took office in June. His very first law as president channeled everything down to one team, the Insurrection Special Counsel. Led by Cho Eun-suk, this team is now solely responsible for investigating and charging Yoon with insurrection. Soon after the special probe started, Yoon was detained again in July, cited for the risk of destroying evidence. By August, dozens of his cabinet members and military leaders were also indicted. And as the probe went deeper, the special counsel added explosive new charges alleging that Yoon used drones to provoke North Korea in October to manufacture a hostile atmosphere, effectively creating a pretext to legitimize the martial law that followed.
Defendants Yoon Suk-yeol, Kim Yong-yeon, and Yo In-young conspired to harm the military interests of the Republic of Korea by increasing the risk of armed conflict between the North and South, with the goal of creating conditions to declare martial law.
But the main charge remains insurrection. Under Article 87 of the Criminal Act, insurrection is defined as creating violence to subvert the Constitution. A ringleader of a rebellion faces death or life imprisonment, while their followers also face heavy punishment. Yoon's defense remains consistent. The declaration was a legitimate act of governance, and the military deployment to the National Assembly was merely to maintain order. While former military officers testified that Yoon ordered key opposition politicians to be detained, Yoon claims he never gave specific targets, only mentioning anti-state forces.
When I say anti-state forces, isn't that referring to spies who are targets of counter-espionage investigations? It's not about regular people.
He argues the decree was also a necessary warning to the public about an opposition party that was paralyzing the government, not an attempt to subvert the Constitution. The special prosecution team rejects this entirely. It has described the event in court as a terror against democratic institutions. The judgment, however, begins with the cabinet. Former Prime Minister Han Duck-soo faces his verdict on January 21st. Prosecutors have requested a 15-year prison sentence. Their argument is that the then Prime Minister had a constitutional duty to stop an illegal order, but he failed to do so.
Although I could not stop the martial law, I never intended to agree with or aid it. That is the most honest confession I can make in this historic court.
If the verdict accepts insurrection charges, this will set the tone for the rest of the rulings. As for former President Yoon, his fate will be decided soon. The court has scheduled his final closing hearings for January 5th, 7th, and 9th. As for the investigation itself, the official investigation period ends in just 2 weeks. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
With just 1 day left before the deadline to pass next year's budget, the ruling and opposition parties have launched last-minute negotiations. On Monday morning, floor leaders from the Democratic Party and the People Power Party met for a second straight day to bridge their differences on key spending items. Sticking points include funding for local gift certificates, policy programs, and special activity expenses for the presidential office. Cuts the PPP is pushing for, and the DP is refusing to accept. The legal deadline is midnight Tuesday, and with the National Assembly meeting only twice in the past, all eyes are on whether the rival parties can strike a deal in time. In North Korea, the regime unveiled what appears to be a new long-range air-to-surface missile, resembling the German-made Taurus, signaling a push to upgrade its air power. Pyun Hae-young reports.
On Friday, North Korea publicly unveiled a new long-range air-to-surface missile for the first time in what appears to be part of a broader effort to modernize its air power. The weapon, visually similar to the German-made Taurus system operated by South Korea, was displayed at an event marking the North Korean Air Force's 80th anniversary. Analysts say the new missile, widely dubbed the North Korean Taurus, could significantly extend the strike range of North Korea's aging combat aircraft if its claimed performance is realized. Attending the ceremony with his daughter Chue, her first public appearance in nearly 3 months, Kim Jong-un declared that new strategic military assets and new important missions have been assigned to the Air Force. He stressed that the service would play a full part in exercising nuclear deterrence and must repel reconnaissance activities and possible military provocations by adversaries. North Korea has been accelerating efforts to upgrade its conventional air capabilities, revealing new unmanned aircraft and an airborne early warning platform earlier this year, and conducting mid-range air-to-air missile tests. Experts believe Pyongyang may be receiving direct or indirect support from Russia as military cooperation between the two deepens. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff cautioned that North Korea often unveils new systems before they are fully tested, and said further evaluations are required to determine their operational capability. Pyongyang, Arirang News.
Aid from Korea is offering a lifeline to women and girls in some of the world's most fragile conflict zones. And to talk about the significance of the funding and how it's making real changes at the site, experts from different country offices have visited Arirang TV. Our Kim Bo-kyung tells us more.
War is a nightmare for everyone, destroying every part of life. But women and girls often suffer the most and end up paying the highest price. Since September last year, South Korea's state aid agency KOICA has been funding the CFP program, which supports conflict-affected and fragile countries through humanitarian assistance. One of the funded partners is the UN Population Fund, which focuses on the urgent needs of women and girls in the world's most dangerous areas. Working in 6 countries, the Central African Republic, Mali, Somalia, South Sudan, Lebanon, and Palestine, the agency provides integrated sexual and reproductive health services and support for survivors of gender-based violence. The program is already making a difference, helping a woman in South Sudan safely deliver a baby after losing 3 previous pregnancies, and giving psychological and legal support to a rape survivor in Mali. Miracles happen in Palestine as well, where 90% of its health facilities have been destroyed.
The funding from the Korean population people is supporting 17 health facilities to continue some semblance of health services. And this is a full package. The money we use it to pay for midwives who are available in Gaza. We bring in medical supplies, commodities, so that midwives can use these commodities to actually address the issues.
Placing women and girls at the center of aid is essential. They're often the most vulnerable, frequently left behind as others compete for limited resources. Another expert adds that working with men, as well as local and traditional leaders, helps build peace from the grassroots up.
We cannot build peace from above, but we have to generate it from the bottom by, first of all, giving the most vulnerable people of the society access to services that would not have been there because of the competition of that resource, and at the same time involve everybody to have discussion on peaceful coexistence at the community level.
South Korea's aid is arriving at a crucial time as global donor investment continues to shrink. Experts say Seoul's experience, once an aid recipient and now a major donor, can serve as a model for fragile countries. To ensure the funding has a lasting impact rather than being a one-off measure, they highlight 3 key factors: sustainable financing, private sector partnerships, and knowledge transfers. One more, they add, is helping young people gain access to technology.
This young population, also in fragile context, they are eager and savvy for learning technology. If there are things that we can put together, also with the support of the private sector, to help us establish initiatives that are long-lasting, impact, income-generating initiatives, especially for this younger cohort, that could be also a way to help us continue the work that we do.
Amid the destruction and loss, South Korea's efforts are giving hope that peace can still grow from the ground up. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
A K-pop boy band Stray Kids has claimed its 8th #1 on the US Billboard chart with its new album, Do It. The album debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 in the week ending November 27th. Following its album Karma, which topped the chart this past September, Stray Kids has become the first act to have all 8 of its Billboard 200 entries debut at #1 in the 69 years of the chart's history. This run began with the album Ordinary back in 2022. Stray Kids now holds the title for the most #1s on this chart this century. Time now to take a look at what's been happening in the world of sports. For that, we have our sports editor, Paul Nitz, joining us in the studio. Welcome back, Paul.
Thank you. Hello.
Paul, why don't we start with the short track speed skating? I believe South Korea ended the ISU World Tour with 4 medals. What can you tell us?
Right. 2 gold and 2 bronze medals were won over the weekend at the final World Tour stop of the year in the Netherlands on Sunday local time. Kim Gil-lee won gold and Chae Min-jong bronze in the 1500 metres. Kim finished with a time of 2 minutes 26.306 seconds, while Chae came in just 2.62 seconds behind. The other gold was won by Im Jong-un, who won the men's 1000 metres with a time of 1 minute 25.877 seconds. The other bronze, meanwhile, came in the 2000 metre mixed relay. The team of Chae, Kim and Im, as well as Hwang Dae-hon, finished with a time of 2 minutes 38.038 seconds behind the Netherlands and the US. Now, the results impact how many places Korea will have in the Winter Olympics next year. The IOC will make the announcement on December 12th.
Fingers crossed for Team Korea. Now, moving on to another major sporting event and one that could happen here in South Korea. I believe a bid is being ready to host the AFC Asian Cup, right?
Yes, a joint bid is being readied apparently along with Japan. Now, according to a Yonhap news article on Friday, a KFA official said that a joint bid with Japan is in the works to host the 2035 AFC Asian Cup. The same officials said that working level talks have taken place with the JFA and they've formed a consensus on how the event could be co-hosted. Of course, Korea and Japan co-hosted the 2002 World Cup. In February this year, the KFA also expressed interest in hosting the 2031 Asian Cup. The AFC will announce the hosts of 2031 and 2035 at the same time, sometime in 2027. All documents must be submitted by June 30th next year. Korea has hosted the AFC Cup once, but way back in 1960, the same year, Korea won the competition.
Right, so you could say South Korea is long overdue to host again and win for that matter too, right? Now, staying with football, the K-League 1 season wrapped up over the weekend. How did that end?
It ended with Daegu FC suffering relegation. They needed to win on the final day to beat FC Anyang and hope that Jeju SK lost to Ulsan. Daegu drew 2-2. They fought back from 2-0 down after 4 minutes with goals from Giovanni and Cezinha. But Jeju, thanks to a goal from Kim Sung-sop late on, meant that Daegu's result didn't matter. It brought an end to their 9-year stay in the first division. But Jeju, finishing 11th, aren't safe yet. They will take on Suwon Blue Wings of K-League 2 in the promotion relegation playoff 1 over 2 legs, with the first leg this Wednesday and the second on Sunday. Suwon FC in 10th will face Bucheon FC 1995 of K-League 2 in the other playoff. The first leg is this Thursday, the second on Sunday. All matches are broadcast for free with English commentary on tv.kleague.com.
I see. Now, finally, the K-League today held its annual award ceremony. Who won the main awards?
Well, Lee Dong-kyung of Ulsan won MVP and Gus Poyet of Jeonbuk won Manager of the Year. Aside from MVP, the awards were mostly otherwise dominated by Jeonbuk, who dominated K-League 1 this season. 6 Jeonbuk players were named in the best 11. Goalkeeper Song Bum-kun, defender Hong Jong-ho, and midfielders Song Min-gyu, Kim Jin-gyu, Park Jin-sop and Kang Sang-yoon. Gangwon's Lee Sung-won won Young Player of the Year.
Great stuff. As always, Paul, thanks for coming tonight. I'll see you next Monday.
Yes, thank you.
The winter cold has finally arrived across the country. The temperature this morning was above average, but it was about 6 degrees lower than yesterday morning. Tomorrow there will be sub-zero cold in Seoul at -1 degree. On Wednesday, it will be even more bitterly cold with temperature falling below zero even during the day. From tomorrow night, heavy snow is expected around the west coast areas. About 3 to 10 centimeters of snow will fall on the mountainous areas of Jeju Island, 3 to 8 on the west coast of Chungcheongnam-do and the Jeollado provinces. Tomorrow morning, Daejeon and Gyeongju will start at 0 degrees, Chuncheon at -4 degrees. Daily highs will rise up to only 3 degrees in Seoul, 9 degrees in Daegu. As a dry weather advisory is in place along the East Coast, please take extra precautions not to cause any wildfires. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.
Knock knock! The magical door to the world of K-animation is swinging wide open. Meet your instant new BFF, the adorable Catch. Tina Ping will have you hooked from the very first glance. Need a hand? Our Robocar Pony Rescue team is always zooming in to save the day. How about tagging along on Pink Fong and Pal's super exciting quest to reclaim their lost magic? With the mysterious life forms Cabion by your side, you can become a Cabion master and save humanity like a total hero. Protecting children's innocence while igniting their boundless imaginations. That's the magic of Korean animation. K-animation, the ultimate bestie for kids worldwide.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gyan. Tensions between China and Japan are entering a dangerous new phase, sparked by a recent comment from Japan's Prime Minister expressing support for Taiwan's autonomy. Now, Beijing responded with travel bans, ministerial snubs, and threats of further retaliation, calling the statement a provocation against its One China principle. But this clash is just the latest flashpoint in a much deeper rivalry, one rooted in history, regional influence, and shifting global alliances. U.S. President Donald Trump has re-engaged, speaking separately to both leaders last week, raising fresh questions about Washington's role in the region. And for South Korea, caught between its two largest neighbors, the stakes are rising fast as a new fault line takes shape across Northeast Asia. For a closer look into the current situation, we connect to Kim Mi-kyung, senior researcher at Gyeongsang National University's Korea Social Sciences Research Institute. A big welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. And also joining us online is Christophe Godin, professor of political science at Kookmin University. Good to see you again, Professor.
Good evening.
So let's start our discussion with Dr. Kim, first with the big picture, of course. So we've been seeing China-Japan relations being deteriorating rapidly lately. What do you see as the structural causes behind this latest conflict?
You see, let me start with the immediate cause first. The immediate cause was Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi's remark made during the Q&A session at Japan's National Diet. She said China's invasion of Taiwan would constitute an existential threat to Japan, and that would justify Japan's military involvement in Taiwan situation. The structural forces of Sino-Japan conflicts are actually multifaceted. They would include Sino-Japan rivalry as the regional hegemon, bilateral territorial disputes over the Senkaku Islands or Diaoyudao in Chinese, Japan's ambition to reinvent itself as a normal country, which can go to war, deep-seated historical issues over Japan's wartime atrocities committed against China, rising nationalistic sentiments in both societies, and finally, China's perception of Japan as the stronghold of America's ambition in Northeast Asia. So the structural forces are multi-layered and multifaceted. Some of them are ideological, some of them are pragmatic, some of them are historical. So these rising tensions between the two countries are not simple.
Right, definitely. So a lot of factors are playing in this latest conflict that's developing. Now, on that note, China has recently strongly pushed back against the Japanese Prime Minister's comments, responding with domestic travel and study advisories regarding Japan and announcing the postponement of a ministerial level meeting as well. Professor Godang, how would you read into this? Do you think it's just simply about containing Japan, or is there a deeper political motive about this?
Well, as Dr. Kim rightly emphasized, this rivalry between China and Japan is multifaceted. But I think here the bottom line is relatively simple. China and Japan are competing economically, politically, militarily. But what's happening now is that China is definitely trying to prepare the invasion of Taiwan. When, we cannot tell. But eventually, this one China principle is the very basis of Chinese diplomacy. So now, the fact that any Asian country, and in particular Japan, that any Asian country will be able to question this objective is simply not to be accepted by China. China now is going through a serious economic crisis, and the invasion of Taiwan will serve two purposes. One will be, of course, economic, because Taiwan is a leader in particular, the production of semiconductors that China desperately needs. And also, as you mentioned, there's also a question of political cohesion. This Taiwan issue is obviously used by the Chinese authorities as a cover to basically hide their, for the moment, relative failure to boost against their economy. So long story short, China is preparing the invasion of China on the long run, and it is basically unacceptable for China that Japan will try to slow them down, basically.
So the intensity of China's reaction seems to reflect their ambitions around Taiwan, we're seeing. Now, when it comes to Japan's response then, Prime Minister Takaichi has made no mention of retracting her remarks so far. Considering Japan's diplomatic and political climate, Dr. Kim, what direction do you think she's likely to take?
You know, I do not think Prime Minister Takaichi is going to formally retract her statement on Taiwan. If and when that happens, she would come across as either weak or blundering by her constituents. That would undermine her popularity built on her hawkish stance vis-à-vis China. Since the domestic approval rating of her performance has gone up dramatically from her standoff with China, retraction of her remark, I don't think is likely. You know, but what she can do is to downplay or refrain from making similar remarks in order to manage the current diplomatic crisis with Beijing. The Tokyo government is likely to utilize rhetorical gestures by expressing its willingness to engage in dialogue with Beijing. But as we have seen, China is not very responsive to those gestures.
So politically, it seems like we're seeing her standing her ground for now. But as you mentioned, as for Beijing's response, it has already warned of further action if there's no retraction coming from Japan. Professor Godang, you know, some are actually saying China's so-called anti-Japan directive is now in full swing. So if Japan actually refuses to yield, how far do you think could China push its retaliatory measures?
For the moment, as Dr. Kim mentioned, Prime Minister Takaichi is walking on a very thin line. On the one hand, she cannot retract because politically it would be suicidal to her. But on the other hand, again, it is impossible for her to risk any further retaliation from China. So what Japan is doing now basically is trying to downplay the previous declarations of Prime Minister Takaichi. That being said, what Prime Minister Takeshi said is that should China invade Taiwan, Japan would have to take military actions. So what it means is that as long as China does not invade Taiwan for good, there is nothing else Japan needs to do in order to substantiate these declarations. So right now what is likely to happen is that most likely Prime Minister Takeshi is to dodge the issue, and if she keeps dodging it, eventually the Chinese government may get back to the way they used to do business a few months ago. Now, I think here the main issue is what happens when Taiwan actually gets invaded. What Prime Minister Takeshi has said is to result in consequences. She has made a statement, and this statement eventually will have to be substantiated. What she has said cannot be unsaid. It cannot be taken back without a formal retractation, and this formal retractation is not to happen realistically. So right now we are to keep navigating in these uncharted waters for a while, but I do not think neither China nor Japan are to say anything very substantial in the next weeks. What I am most concerned with is about what will happen when real military operations are to take place. For the moment, it's just words. The problem is more like what is to follow in the future when military action is to take place.
Right. So we are currently in a very tough position and at the brink of some potential military action. And so, in fact, the U.S. President Donald Trump, who could be a key player, a key influencer to both countries, he held phone calls last week with both the leaders of China and Japan. So, Dr. Kim, what do you think is the strategic message or the objective behind the American president's outreach?
It seems like President Trump wants to play a mediator's role between China and Japan. The sequence of his actions is actually quite interesting. Mr. Trump initiated the call with Prime Minister Takaichi at his own request, briefing her on his conversation with Chinese President Xi Jinping. And he has been maintaining distance from both sides, even though he and Ms. Takaichi signed an agreement on the bilateral, quote, new golden age, end quote, last October. He recently characterized U.S.-China relationship as extremely strong, and it is highly likely that the U.S. will maintain strategic ambiguity on the Taiwan issue as he is treating relationship with China as his priority. So President Trump seems to have his mission as mediator between the disputing countries in this region, but at the same time, he seems to prioritize American relationship with China over that with Japan.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that opinion, Dr. Kim. But staying on that front, there are also growing concerns that President Trump is more focused on trade and economic negotiations rather than its traditional security issues. So from this angle, Professor Godang, how does this China-Japan conflict potentially strengthen America's negotiating leverage?
Well, it is probably not a good time to be a U.S. ally these days, because what Trump prioritizes, as you said, it's trade. It is U.S. interest, plain and simple. So for now, as Japan is seen to be a declining power in D.C., I do not think Japan can be expecting any substantial support from the US government. And in fact, when it comes to what is happening in Taiwan, it is true that, Dr. Kim is very right to mention that now President Trump's strategy relies in ambiguity. But ambiguity is a very good position to be because it doesn't force you to take any action as long as the other power is not taking action either. So what it means is that for now, as long as China does not invade Taiwan for good, the US is in a good place. But should this invasion happen, then this will deal the cards again, because for the moment, the US is heavily dependent on Taiwan, South Korea too, but mostly Taiwan, for these semiconductors that America is not producing for the moment. So should Taiwan get invaded, the US would become dependent on China, including for military technology, which Trump obviously cannot accept. So for the moment, Trump is postponing the issue, which is probably a smart move because he thinks that eventually China won't go one step too far. So right now, China and America are playing chicken, and Japan is just a pawn in this game, at least from President Trump's perspective. In his view, diplomacy is all about superpowers negotiating with one another. Say the US with Russia about Ukraine, but without Ukraine, the US with China about Taiwan, but without Taiwan and without Japan. That's the way President Trump envisions world relations.
So considering its national interest, it seems as though President Trump is pushing through with his America First policy indeed, even though, of course, Japan is a key ally of the United States. So I wonder how this is being received in Japan, Dr. Kim, and also what kind of effect might this silence from Washington have on the overall dynamics?
I can think of two words that would best describe the mood in Japan. They are anxiety and confusion. Trump's public silence on Japan's escalating dispute with China has frayed nerves in Tokyo. Some seem to think that Trump may be prepared to soften its support for Taiwan in pursuit of a trade accord with China. This is particularly so because a similar behavior was recorded in the 1970s, when the Nixon administration normalized its relations with China. Trump's ambiguous stance, ambiguity, could have serious regional implications. Japan seems to fear that if the US and the world are prepared to accept forced border changes in Europe through Russian aggression, they could also decline to intervene in the case of China's attack on Taiwan. The overall US attitude of ambiguity indeed leaves Tokyo in the precarious position. It is forced to absorb China's pressure while remaining uncertain about American backing, but at the same time, it is unable to fundamentally pivot away from Washington. This is Japan's dilemma. In response to America's ambiguity, Japan is likely to intensify its hedging strategy. It needs to bolster its defense capabilities, recalibrate alliance, and expand security partnerships. To diversify its diplomatic options, Japan is strengthening its ties with Europe, the UK, Australia, and other partners as an insurance against American unpredictability. So Japan is trying to do something about America's ambiguity, but at the same time, it has limited options, unfortunately.
So with mounting tensions continuing in the region, so we are expecting a trilateral between Korea, China, and Japan in January. So if this trilateral cooperation actually weakens because of this rising tensions lately, Professor Godang, what might that mean for Northeast Asia?
Well, the first thing I need to say is that ever since Trump was elected, there has never been that many international meetings all the time. Because ever since Trump has come back to power, it means that the UN and all of the places for international negotiation have literally collapsed. There doesn't seem to be anything as a stable international order anymore. It is all about state by state, leader to leader negotiations. So typically between the US and China, typically between US and Russia, etc., etc. What it means for Northeast Asia, you're right, is concerning, because middle powers, not to mention smaller powers, do not bear any significance in Trump's worldview. And the problem is that in East Asia, you do not have any democratic power that would be sizable enough alone to basically fight back against Trump. So what Japan is trying to do now, that is strengthening links with Australia, with the EU, is probably the right way to proceed, but it is happening a bit too late. The diplomacy that President Lee Jae-myung is trying to push for is very similar, because what Lee Jae-myung is trying to do in Korea is trying to strengthen ties with all democratic powers all over the world. So that's the one way to go, obviously. We need some sort of normalcy because Korea and Japan realistically are not powerful enough to fight back against China. They are not powerful enough alone to live without America. And so strengthening ties with other democratic powers is the right way to go. The only concern, of course, is whether it's not too late. That's the right way to go. Now, the key issue is time, in my opinion. The sooner, the better.
Definitely. Now, with this latest developments, the direction of South Korea's, path moving forward is also a big question. So, Dr. Kim, what kind of diplomatic course do you think Seoul should actually take moving forward between balanced diplomacy and value-based diplomacy? Where should South Korea stand right now?
I believe South Korea is between rock and hard place. South Korea needs to tread precarious waters in order to secure not only its survival, but also its success in this rapidly shifting international and regional environment. Seoul is watching with mounting alarm as tensions between China and Japan escalate, a development that threatens to test its pragmatic diplomacy and its balancing act between Beijing and Washington. Korea needs to calmly observe rising Japan-China tensions and do its best to maximize its interest. I would predict that Seoul government would try to institutionalize trilateral engagement, as Seoul should prioritize China, Japan, South Korea trilateral framework as a neutral platform to manage tensions. Unlike Japan, which has explicitly stated its position, President Lee has already stated that South Korea would steer clear of military involvement in any Taiwan Strait conflict. That is the Korean version of strategic ambiguity. This allowed Seoul to maintain both its security alliance with Washington and economic ties with Beijing without being forced into an explicit choice. Lee administration emphasizes economic pragmatism over ideological alignment. That has been the fundamental principle of his diplomacy from the outset. And it will not choose a side, escalating US-China tensions. So it will try to remain neutral. It will try to facilitate the tensions by institutionalizing certain mechanisms for the three countries in the region, and it will try to maximize its national interest without risking provoking any involved parties. This is going to be a tough call. We shall see how the Lee administration is going to manage this particular and very challenging tension.
Definitely. So South Korea's response from here could really shape its standing for years to come. Let's hope for a cautious approach to this. Thank you so much for your insights, Dr. Kim.
Thank you for having me.
And of course, Professor Godang, we really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.
How to survive in Korea. Workplace. Step 1. Lunchtime. The most important morning routine is to check today's menu. Food is essential.